Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hi there from Vietnam. How is everybody? How are you all? Are you having a good week? Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast, which is brought to you by Kraken. How are you enjoying this ATM series so far? You enjoying it? Have you enjoyed the 2 interviews that I've released so far? Thank you for all the great feedback also, and to everyone who shared it out. I really do appreciate it. It's definitely a part of the industry I didn't know enough about, learnt a lot more from all the guests that have come on. And today I've got an interview with Chris Yim from LibertyX, who, similar to Athena, are an operator, but have expanded into selling Bitcoin via cashiers and kiosks. But before we hear from Chris, I do have a message from my show sponsors. So firstly, today's show is brought to you by Bitcoin ATM Radar. Buying from a machine is much more reliable and safer from meeting some random person in a random location. With Coin ATM Radar, you can find Bitcoin ATMs and other services where you can buy or sell crypto for cash. On their website, you can search by coin, address, and you can also search by geo area, so country, state, and city. You can also filter results. A lot of people complain about the fees for Bitcoin ATMs, where you can even filter by lowest fee. They also have a mobile app which is available on the Apple and Google App Stores, and they also fully support operators. So if you operate one or even several machines, it definitely makes sense for you to submit your information about locations to Coin ATM Radar, which is free of charge and will bring additional visibility to your service. If you want to find out more, head over to coinatmradar.com, which is coinatmradar.com. Also, today's show is brought to you by LibertyX. If you want to buy Bitcoin instantly and don't want to wait days for a wire or bank transfer, you definitely need to check out LibertyX. They operate America's largest network of Bitcoin ATMs, cashiers, and kiosks with thousands of locations across 43 states. You can pay however you want, whether it's cash or debit card, and the process is super easy. I know because I tried it out when I was out in the States and I downloaded their app. All you need to do is download the app from the App Store and create a free account. You can search for your nearest purchase location, provide your Bitcoin address, and then you can complete your payment buying anything from $1 up to $3,000 a day. The Bitcoin is delivered for you instantly before you leave the store. To find out more, head over to libertyx.com, which is LIBERTYX.com, or search for LibertyX in the Apple or Google App Stores. Okay, so on to the third installment of Bitcoin ATM Week. So far, we've heard from the operator side of the industry with Athena and the manufacturers with General Bytes. And if you haven't listened to those yet, please go back and check them out. They were both fascinating interviews. But today, I've got Chris Yim from LibertyX. He joins me on the podcast. So LibertyX operates America's largest network of Bitcoin ATMs, cashiers, and kiosks, and launched the very first Bitcoin ATM in the US. Unlike Athena, who I spoke to in the first episode, who only operate Bitcoin ATMs, LibertyX's aim is to utilize more traditional ATMs and the banking systems to try and get Bitcoin into as many hands as they can and making the process as seamless and as efficient as possible. So in this episode, we hear about how LibertyX went from a single ATM at Boston's South Station to now operating in thousands of locations across 43 states. It's a fascinating interview. A big thanks to Chris for coming on. And also, if you've enjoyed this and you've got any feedback, you know you can reach out to me. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. I'm obviously away on holiday at the moment, but I will get back to you as soon as possible. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the show. Hi there, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Must be morning for you there, right?
Yeah. It's 9 a.m. So not too early, but just getting started.
Well, thanks for getting up early to do this for me. This is great. So obviously you're aware I'm doing a week of shows dedicated to the ATM industry. I've been learning a lot about it myself. So it's great to have you guys on because you're one of the oldest firms in this part of the crypto industry, right?
Yeah. We actually launched America's first Bitcoin ATM in early 2014 here in Boston South Station.
Wow. Was that a Bitcoin only ATM or one of the ATMs, which is a traditional ATM as well?
Yeah, back then we tried to go straight to traditional ATMs, but it didn't have too much luck since a lot of people didn't really think Bitcoin had legs in late 2013, early 2014. So what we ended up doing is we worked with Lamasu, bought one of their machines, which was really a bank vault with a tablet and an internet connection, and put that in South Station. and actually, it was so novel at the time. What we had to do was there was a old Redbox DVD rental machine that was just sitting around. So we ended up buying out their machine, replacing it with ours. So for a while, we had a hybrid Bitcoin ATM and DVD kiosk business.
Well, do you know what you say? People didn't think it had legs back then. There's still people who still don't think this has legs right now.
Yeah. It's crazy. You have people also that are thinking about launching their own Bitcoin ATM operation even today, 5 years later, which is great.
Yeah. So, okay, so you've launched the first one. What was that like? Tell me a couple of things. Like, firstly, why did you do it? Secondly, what kind of demand did you see early on? And also, what kind of regulatory framework did you have to follow back then? Because essentially, this, if you're doing the first one, there was no regulatory framework for these specific machines, I'm guessing.
Sure. So really back then, it really stemmed from our own, Kyle and myself's own Bitcoin purchasing experience. So we had met, in middle of 2013, and we both kind of fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole about the same time, learned about the technology. For me, I was always interested in public equities. My dad worked in the biopharma industry, and we were always watching and analyzing the stock market. And in that space, you're always looking for misunderstood small and mid cap size companies that are adversely affected by, by whether positive or negative news. And I think Bitcoin had a lot of those elements. So when I first came across it, it was like, okay, well, how do I get some of this? And this was really before Coinbase or any of the other exchanges existed at scale. So as you probably know, there's a site called Local Bitcoins.
Yeah, that was the first site I ever bought Bitcoin on.
and I'm sure you have some good stories there as well. So when I started at Wharton, I was talking about Bitcoin to everybody I knew. The only other person that it even registered with was Kyle. And we're like, okay, well, first things first, let's buy some. So we loaded up Local Bitcoins, did a lot of screening, ended up finding a person that was willing to meet us in West Philadelphia. We did a bunch of, back and forth emails, phone screens, and got confident enough to do the in-person meet. I convinced Kyle to come along with me to be my muscle in case things went south. And then we went to that cafe, ended up being perfectly fine. 20 minutes later, we had some Bitcoin, and it was extremely exciting. But that was kind of the aha moment where it's like, if this has any chance of getting off the ground, we have to dramatically fix this because, we love being trailblazers, but no one else. We didn't think anyone else was going to even entertain something like that. So, we took a step back and thought about how if this model existed in the, legacy world, and, decided that, okay, the ATM, the kiosk is something that makes a lot of sense. At the end of the day, you don't need that much to facilitate a Bitcoin transaction, right? You just need a way, if you're exchanging fiat, a way to get that money, and then you just need a connection to the internet. So there was a company, Lamasu, at the time that we reached out to and ended up working with that had this really nice, sleek looking machine that we purchased. And, just to be honest, it was really, we thought there was a huge demand for it. So we're like, no matter where we put it, it's going to do well. Well, South Station gets tens of millions of passengers and walk through traffic every year. So we thought that made a lot of sense.
And how were you providing liquidity back then?
Yeah, back then it was provided by Kyle and myself. So there were some early OTC desks and also our own personal Bitcoin stash. Fortunately, we both came from more traditional backgrounds. Myself, I was coming from investment banking and venture capital, and Kyle consulting and private equity. So we had a little savings, and back then, Bitcoin wasn't $10,000, so it was pretty easy. People were buying smaller amounts, but was very, very encouraging because people were coming into Boston from Logan, and they were making a point to come all the way to our machine to use it and to meet us, which was very exciting.
But I guess even at that stage, there is a risk that you're buying it and the price has changed, so you're having to then sell it at a lower price than you've purchased it. How did you manage that?
In the early days, it wasn't really managed so much. We knew that there was a real cost to buying Bitcoin, holding it, dealing with the the cash logistics. But it was really more of a proving that there was product market fit,
Right.
proving that there were people out there that wanted this. So we just added 5% to our purchase price, and it sold like hotcakes.
Wow. So what kind of volumes were you doing early on?
I think the stat that we were really proud of, we did 1,000 transactions in a little over the first month.
Wow.
And just the fact that people had to find the machine. We were located, I don't know if you've been to South Station at all, but essentially there's it's like a staging area for the Amtrak trains. So we were between tracks 5 and 6 on the way out. So there were a ton of foot traffic, but a lot of the times, especially during trains, it's just people, with a mad dash. So we found out that it wasn't necessarily the best to be right in the middle of all the foot traffic, but during off hours, people were coming, all times a day.
Right. Interesting. Were there any KYC AML requirements back then?
Well, so Kyle and I actually, because we were not allowed to bolt the machine down, we were standing next to the machine pretty much all day. So, so it was great in that we got to know our customer base really well. If people had any questions, we were happy to talk to them. And I think that that's something that has served us really well. A lot of people, especially running online businesses, you spend a lot of time, trying to verify the person is who they say they are. Whereas for us, it's a little weird to ask someone for their ID in person when they're about to use your machine, but it was necessary friction at the time. We've always been very conservative when it comes to KYC. So yeah, but we were talking to them, getting a feel for, what they were trying to do. And back then it was really people just trying to dabble, right? It was the easiest way to buy Bitcoin. And that's really the stepping stone for everything else that follows.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about what follows. And I'm not sure how lengthy this answer will be, but you've gone there from one machine up into today where you've got, quite a significant business. You don't just have ATMs, you also have the cashiers and the debit kiosks. So can you just take me through the kind of history of the company from that one machine, how you initially expanded, and then just walk me through to where we are today? And I'll probably keep some notes.
So, off the success of that first machine, we're like, okay, this is awesome. Where we found something that people want. So let's continue to press it. We eventually added 3 more of those same BTMs at Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, and Boston. And, similarly, we had to go to each one, manage it, deal with the operational issues. Very quickly, we understood that the concept of the Bitcoin ATM was still very new. We had people that were shoving business cards, pieces of plastic into the bill acceptor, which would take the machine out. In terms of marketing and visibility, it was great because you had a big sign, you had this machine that people were standing around talking about. But 4 was actually when we started to hit a lot of growing pains. The machines are not really cheap, and part of that is it's actually a bank grade vault. You had to deal with the cash logistics. The more you sell, the more you have to go take the money out of the machine, deposit it at a bank. And we're like, okay, well, we had people coming from all over the country, all over the world. There has to be a better way to capitalize in this market to make a more efficient transaction, especially, to my earlier point, all you're really doing, right, is transmitting this transaction on the internet. So we decided ultimately to move to a software only model, and we ended up building our own web POS. So all that really was a nice little platform that let anybody who wanted to sell Bitcoin, any store, essentially handle that part of the process in this web app. So the way our platform predominantly works today is you download our app, you create an account with us. It's all free. You find a location that you want to purchase from. When you select a location, you provide us your Bitcoin address, and in return, we give you a 6-digit order number. And then that's what you give to the cashier. That's what you enter on the ATM. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the reason we do that is, the Bitcoin address is very long, prone to transcription errors. So what we've done is replaced it with a very simple temporary order number so that you can give it to the cashier easily, that you can enter a machine easily. And then once you complete the payment at the cashier or at the ATM, we immediately send you the Bitcoin.
Right. Okay. That sounds pretty efficient.
Yeah, and I think that was really off the insight that we had, that everybody wants, at some point, it seems like, to become a Bitcoin ATM operator, to have one of these machines, to sell to customers, to become part of the ecosystem. So what we did, and what we thought made a lot of sense, was like, okay, well, how can we lower the friction for them? Not everyone's going to have $10,000 to buy a machine, or tens of thousands of dollars to supply float. But what they can do is that, they can become a cashier for us, or if they already have an ATM, which, there are 100,000 plus out there in the US, they can have this loaded onto the machine, and they'll be part of that Bitcoin on-ramp ecosystem.
Okay, so it really is about just providing a range of different options and the best ways for people to buy in person.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Bitcoin is so new. I mean, it's been around 10 plus years now, but for a lot of people, they've heard about it. They're starting to contemplate buying some, trying it out themselves. But there's just a lot of friction, and some of that is as simple as, we hear this a lot. Oh, I want to buy some Bitcoin, but am I not going to get anything physical back?
Yeah, I get a piece of paper.
And exactly. They feel like, the traditional transaction process, they feel like they're being, gypped in a little ways. So it's funny, but having a legacy part of the transaction, whether it's going and buying from a cashier or human in front of you, or going from a traditional ATM that they have been going to for years to take out cash, helps alleviate some of that friction. Even though you're not getting anything physical, you're transacting with something in front of you. And I think that provides this level of trust that, for a lot of the incremental customer, is just really helpful to get them over the hump.
Okay, and can you give me any kind of numbers or any kind of data on the volumes of transactions, say on an ATM versus a cashier versus the debit kiosk?
That's a good question. I would say that for the debit kiosk, we're actually seeing a lot of people initially purchase smaller amounts. So think something on the order of $5 to $20, and then as they come back, they buy more and more, and very often will purchase 1,000 to 3,000 a day.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this as just an evolution of, well, the first transaction, probably, similar to your first transaction, it's about trust.
Yeah.
It's about making sure it works. It's about understanding how long it takes after I make my payment before it's in my account and I can actually use and transact it.
It's quite addictive, right, Chris? When you do that
Yeah.
first purchase, I remember mine, again, it was probably like $50 worth, just because you're just like, what is this? I want to get my head around it. And you purchase it and you move it somewhere to some wallet or something. And then it becomes quite addictive. So you buy a bit more. And like you say, you end up, I mean, I remember when the second time I got into it, I bought like $50 worth. And then I think within the space of a week, I'd bought like 6 or 7 Bitcoin.
Awesome.
Yeah. You get the addiction.
It's definitely, I think the first cycle, right? The first, when you actually receive it, to send it out and everything's confirmed, that's a big sigh of relief.
Yep, massive sigh. Okay, so let's find a bit more about the business. So firstly, I've spoken to Gil from Athena,
Mhm.
and they're obviously Bitcoin only ATMs. But again, as we spoke, you've gone down this route of having traditional ATMs, which allow for the purchase of Bitcoin. How does that work in terms of, firstly, acquiring the machines to do this? Because there are specific manufacturers for Bitcoin ATMs. Have you had to manufacture your own, or have you had to go to a traditional ATM and ask them to merge in the Bitcoin as well?
Sure. Yeah, we've contemplated all that stuff, and 5 years ago, the route it seemed like you had to take was to do everything yourself, which is always dangerous because it's very expensive, and any cost that the company bears, you have to pass through to the customer, or you have to raise tremendous amounts of venture capital. So the reason that we initially moved from the physical Bitcoin ATM to the web POS software was because software it can be free. It runs in any browser. It was very, very efficient to scale. So for the cashier model, really nothing was really required. I think that was actually an integral step to get the traditional ATM partnership, because you need to show that you're capable of supporting volumes, that this Bitcoin business is actually real. Obviously, anytime you work with a legacy partner, they have competing priorities, namely the traditional ATM model, dispensing cash, adding other value-added features. So when we got to a certain scale, we started reaching out to all these partners and just learning more about exactly what goes on in the ATM transaction. And it's actually pretty complicated, but it just made a lot of sense, right? You enter your debit card, you enter your PIN number, a bunch of stuff goes on behind the scenes, and cash is dispensed. We had the thought, like, okay, well, what if you do that same thing, except instead of dispensing cash, you do this Bitcoin transaction? And then we started talking with a bunch of parties. We eventually worked with a company called Genmega. They sell about half of the non-bank retail ATMs out there. What that means is, so, the majority of the ATMs are, Bank of America, Citi, JP Morgan, all the big banks, but there's actually a ton, 100,000 plus of these non-bank that are in convenience stores, gas stations, bowling alleys, what have you. Probably the place that you grew up and went to has one of these machines. And we worked with Genmega on developing the software to the point where it actually is as simple as a software update. We're now a setting in the default ATM setup.
Wow.
Where you can activate LibertyX. We provide a few configuration settings, and before you know it, now you have LibertyX on your ATM. From the company side, then we list you on our store locator. We do a bunch of marketing, promotional campaigns to send customers your way. And what we found is, the more machines, the better. Our goal is to put Bitcoin on every block, because I think that's what's required to make it real, to make it easy to use and transact. And from there, it'll be really exciting to see, where things go. But every single location that we've placed does volume that has reliable and steady users. And I think that's the market that is really missing from a lot of the traditional financial services. And especially, the rural areas may never be able to have the economics to justify putting down $10,000 machine, but certainly it can justify having a few cashiers or a few ATMs loaded with our software to sell to customers.
That's a great marketing line you just said there. I don't know if you even meant it, but you said your goal is to put Bitcoin on every block.
Yeah, it is.
Did you mean the pun?
No, I didn't. Maybe we can figure out how to share the rights.
Yeah. So what happens? So is it up to, therefore, the store to choose if they've got an ATM, if they want to allow Bitcoin to be part of it?
Yeah. It's always is opt-in. You never really, for new technology, right? It's ultimately, you want to do your best to educate the partners, because you don't want them to be roadblocks. But what we found is a store or any owner generally wants two things. They want foot traffic, and they want revenues, alternative revenue streams to their core business. And fortunately, our value proposition is pretty simple, and we do both those things. We bring a millennial population into your stores, or ATM operators get a cut of every transaction. It's, in our opinion, a pretty simple win-win.
Okay, so they take a cut of the transaction. Does a cut also go to the machine provider?
No. So the machine providers, their core business is selling to the operators and just really focusing on that. So if they can sell more machines, which actually a lot of people have been switching over to the Genmega because they want this. The other interesting thing is Bitcoin ATM, call it somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000. A traditional ATM is only about $2,000 to $3,000. So for a lot of these traditional ATM operators, they had been thinking about entering the Bitcoin ATM space. So we are able to offer something that is actually cheaper, doesn't require that they do all that specialized research and purchasing for a Bitcoin only machine. And instead, they save both physical footprint space and some dollars, which is great for everyone.
Does the store itself have any KYC AML requirements? Is it all baked into the software?
Yeah, so it's all, we handle all that, and
Right.
That's a big reason why we have our own app. A lot of people, if you use a regular Bitcoin ATM, you can create the account on the machine, scan your wallet. For us, we stage the transaction, and that's really twofold. One is so that we can do the KYC, we can make the process very simple while you're downloading the app. and also to minimize the actual friction and time when you're making the payment. So you're not standing in front of the ATM for 10 minutes or standing in front of the cashier for 10 minutes. You're actually, when you go to the cashier or ATM, you're just providing that code that is generated only when you have an account and provided a Bitcoin address to us.
So when you say first time go to the machine, and if you try and withdraw to Bitcoin, it's going to ask you to provide your code, and if you haven't got one, it's going to tell you to download the app.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a nice. We live in a world today where not everyone has a LibertyX app yet.
Yeah.
Obviously, that will change as we go forward, but it's really a dual flow. If you have a LibertyX app and you have a code, then you go straight to the finish line. Otherwise, you need to just take a step to the side, download the app, and create your LibertyX account.
And the LibertyX app is also a wallet.
It is not. It is
It's
not. That's a good point. So, since the beginning, we were very intentional about trying to be very open and work with all the companies out there. Obviously, building a wallet is a full-time business. Should be a full-time business. So our ethos there has always been BYO wallet. You can use any wallet out there. We actually just announced an integration with Edge Wallet, where we're one of the options where you can select to buy Bitcoin, and at that flow, you don't even have to provide your wallet address. It automatically pulls it in. So we're working on partnerships there. It's still an area of friction. You have to have your own wallet, but we found that customers prefer it because they can specify whatever they want and they don't need to change their own wallet behavior.
Okay, so following on from that, with the traditional business, when I spoke to Gil, he talked to me a lot about the KYC AML requirements. How burdensome has that been for you?
I would say not particularly, since that's always been something that we've done. Obviously, that was an area of a lot of research before we even launched the first machine. And part of it is back then there was very, very little clarity. We just spent a lot of time reading every state's regulations, reading federal regulations. Now I think it's a little easier in that there are plenty of other Bitcoin, fiat to Bitcoin exchanges out there, mostly online, but you can kind of see what is possible and what you should be doing. So for us, we're pretty conservative. So, we may ask for more information than some of the other Bitcoin ATM operators out there, but we try to stage it so that you're able to get that first transaction, trust us, and be comfortable with providing more information. So for us, we have a $200 a day limit, and that's just with the verified phone number. So with that, you can't buy that much, but you can go through the experience. You can purchase from an ATM, see that it works, see that we actually do send the Bitcoin instantly, which actually is quite novel in itself, because a lot of the guys out there, they'll batch transactions. They might wait to do it manually. For us, it's literally instant. As soon as you complete that payment, it's sent. And I think that it's things like that that just make consumers a little more comfortable. And then at the end, they're actually okay with some of the KYC burden. It's just the price to pay. I think because it's a new technology, because we're a software company, we've just tried to be very, very proactive around that, try to get ahead of what might be coming. And I think that attitude was very helpful for us as we got our, the New York Bit license earlier this year. And we're also on the fintech. It was a process. I think it's obviously a huge market for us. Since we got it, we haven't re-entered back into the space. So when we do, it'll be a really, really exciting opportunity for us. Obviously, financial capital of the country, if not the world. And it's just something that you have to be really, really careful about. And I think for better or for worse, because Bitcoin and crypto is so exciting, you get a ton of bad actors. You really saw that during the ICO craze.
Yep.
These days, fortunately, a little bit less so. But, we don't worry too much about that. We just worry about, what we're doing. And I think that as long as we can keep doing that, there's a ton of people out there that still don't own Bitcoin that at some point will be interested in trying it out. And we just want to be there for them when they do that and try to make that experience as easy and simple as possible so that they have a good experience and they end up telling their friends about how it works, because that's really how you spread it. It's through word of mouth. It's not through marketing. It's not through these splashy campaigns, too good to be true giveaways. It's through trusted intermediaries and, deciding that you want to buy it when you want to buy it.
Yeah. Next up, I talked to Chris more about the vision of LibertyX, about putting a Bitcoin ATM on every block. But before that, I do have a message from my show sponsors. So just a quick shout out, firstly, to Kraken. You know who they are. They're the best exchange in the world. With spot, futures, margin trading, their OTC desk, and indices, they've got all your trading needs covered. With security in their DNA, it is the only place I now buy and sell Bitcoin. If you want to join me in supporting Kraken, head over to kraken.com, which is KRAKEN.com. Also, my other regular main sponsor, BlockFi, the future of Bitcoin and financial services. They offer crypto-backed loans. They've got crypto interest accounts, which I'm using. You can find out more at blockfi.com, which is BLOCKFI.com. Next up, Dropbit, the best mobile wallet for Bitcoin. Text and tweet Bitcoin to your friends. It's just like a Venmo for Bitcoin. You got to check them out. Head over to dropbit.app, which is DROPBIT.app. And last but not leastly, Accounting, the best tax calculator in the market. Also includes an amazing portfolio manager, and it connects to all major wallets and exchanges. If you want to find out more, head over to accointing.com, which is ACCOINTING.com. Okay, so earlier on you were talking about the original experience of trying to buy Bitcoin, say with local Bitcoins. I mean, mine was an online transaction, but I had to provide all this proof. I remember I used to have to take photos of myself holding like a written statement that they told me to send and various IDs, and then I'd do a bank transfer of the money. Then I'd obviously have to wait for them. And it was just this process wasn't great. I can understand why in those days the ATM would have been a much smoother experience. But now, obviously, there's a lot of exchanges out there. There's other services like Cash App that have made it a lot easier to buy Bitcoin. What is the use case today versus, say, Cash App? Why would somebody use an ATM versus, an exchange or something on their phone? Because really, with something like the Cash App, you don't have to go anywhere. With an ATM, you still have to go to a physical location. So what is the use case you're finding?
Sure. And I'd say it's really two things. And one is trust, and the other is settlement and funding. So with Cash App, yes, you're right. You can do it from the comfort of your couch, but you do have to load your account. And there is some delay there before you can actually withdraw the Bitcoin. So for some people, especially when they're trying their first transaction, it's that first end-to-end time period, right? It's like until you can actually move the Bitcoin off the exchange, or if you're using it to buy something online, you're kind of nervous and not really sure if your experience is going to end well. For us, it's instant. As soon as you make that payment to us at a store, we can send you that Bitcoin instantly. And it's part of it is just due to the way the legacy payment structure works in the US. Cash is instant and irreversible. A Bitcoin transaction is instant and irreversible. You can't accept a reversible payment like an ACH for something irreversible. Otherwise, you're going to very quickly find yourself out of business. So that's this new interesting paradigm where cash actually can provide something unique that bank transfers cannot, and that's the instant and irreversible functionality. Same with debit card transactions at ATMs. The second thing is the trust point that I think I mentioned a little bit earlier. It's you already know these stores. They're in your neighborhood. They've been around for years. That provides this level of comfort that when you go, you're talking to a person, you're interfacing with the machine that isn't new, that's been around for a while. And I think that together, that provides a level of comfort that will attract and convince a certain population that this is something they want to transact and try out.
But could you provide instant Bitcoin settlement with debit cards via the LibertyX app? Is that something you could do?
Hopefully one day. Today, the way an online debit card not present, which means the card is not physically being presented at the point of sale, the chargeback risk goes to the merchant.
Oh, right. Okay.
So then similarly to if you do a reversible bank transfer, a lot of people would like to get free Bitcoin and charge back their purchase. Or, maybe the price of Bitcoin goes down and they decide they don't want it anymore. Yeah, unfortunately, the way the system's set up right now, we can't offer that yet. But I agree. I think what we're seeing is this emergence of physical retail being a great avenue to acquire and onboard users. Similarly, with the convenience of Cash App, Robinhood, Coinbase, I think it's likely that they may want to move downstream into physical as well. We're seeing it with just retail, with Warby Parker, a lot of these online services. They're actually going and opening their own retail stores. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's like a nice marriage to be had with the physical BTM operators and the online players.
Yeah, I saw that recently when I was out in LA. I went to one of the physical Amazon stores, which at first I was like, this is weird that Amazon have a store, but actually, what a great experience. You can have your collections there, so you don't have to have something sent to your house, but while you're there, you've obviously got the point of sale option for buying other things. I thought it was a great marriage of the two, actually. So you're probably right. Also, with that, what are the main challenges that you've had in growing the business? I spoke to Gil about various challenges that they've had. What are the main challenges if you had, and also have you had challenges with getting banking services yourself?
Sure. To your first question, I think it's all about enterprise relationships and scaling. So we're at the point where we're quite large. We have several thousand locations around the country. We're operational in 43 states. So for us, we're not thinking about adding, 1, 5, 10 machines at a time. That is great for the ecosystem, but it doesn't move the needle for us. So now we're talking about, we're working with bigger operators, larger legacy partners. And for them, they're still relatively skeptical. They have their own core business that they need to worry about, shareholders that they need to satisfy there. So we need to essentially paint them a case that explains that this is, a very low risk, great way to grow their customer base, bring new customers in, and essentially provide a nice revenue stream for them. And that takes time. Obviously, a lot of people learn or hear about Bitcoin in the news, and during bear markets, during the blockchain, not Bitcoin phase, a lot of companies were kind of on the sidelines waiting or unsure that this was really for them. I think, fortunately, for once, we actually have a lot of positive catalysts. Everything is aligned right now, especially going into the halvening. So we're seeing a lot of those partners that we talked to 3-4 years ago come back and say, "Oh, yeah, let's finally do something here." But as you can imagine, it's very hard when you have to wait for somebody else to act. So I would say that that's a challenge. It's staying focused, being patient, continuing to provide updates, working to build that very, very simple case for a partner that makes them want to try it, without worrying about risking their legacy business.
So I guess if you could get a company like Bank of America, that would significantly move the needle forward.
Yeah. Well, Bank of America has a lot of branches. I forget the name of the service. I remember there was one where you could go and deposit cash into a Bank of America branch to buy Bitcoin. That would be probably the simplest process. Everyone, knows how to do that. Unfortunately, I think that, I was talking about moving the needle for them. They are a very, very big company. I cannot see that really happening anytime soon, as much as I would love it.
Okay, so you talked then about the halvening. By the way, I keep getting criticised for saying halvening. It's meant to be halving. I don't know if you've had the same, but I don't. I actually prefer halvening. It feels a bit more epic. But so you're talking about that's coming. So can you talk to me about your experience of running the business through a bear market? What was the impact on volumes? And now, are you starting to see things pick up? And is that your expectation? It is because of the halving next year?
Sure. So part of it is that we've been growing very, very rapidly. So even during the bear markets, we have grown, but it's been a much more modest growth. The other part is we don't really have very much speculative trading volume because we're buy only, and the fees probably don't make it such that you can really do arbitrage or anything like that. So during periods of low volatility, during bear markets, a lot of the online exchanges, they have volumes drop, 80, 90%. For us, it's been flat or maybe slightly down. I think for us, it's really attracting new users that drives that growth engine. And what we've seen is during periods of price appreciation, everyone's running in. Probably not the best strategy, right, to buy when the price goes up. When the price goes down, we see a little slowdown. We haven't seen too much of the value investor. Like when the price went from 18,000 to 4,000, it was pretty flat. But now as we start to rise back up, we're seeing a lot of interest. I think a big part of it is attributable to now we have locations that are very, very densely located in markets that we previously weren't by picking back off existing ATM routes. So we're able to address new incremental customers there. And yes, I think a lot of it is now we're at the point where the average consumer looking to buy crypto has a lot more awareness, is educated. They understand the supply cap. They understand that, maybe mining isn't the way to play that. And they are trying to think about how they want to add a position ahead of the having.
Yeah. So why don't you offer a self-service? Because that gives you the opportunity to make a percentage on both sides.
Yeah. It's something that we've certainly thought about, and I think probably we will inevitably add at some point. It really comes down to just doing one thing. I think one reason we've been able to succeed and do so well, especially through two bear markets, is we've only focused on this one thing, which is getting Bitcoin in every block, right? Making it super simple for consumers to buy Bitcoin easily and through a trustworthy manner. Part of that is we were the first company to provide phone and live chat customer support, which really doesn't scale at all and is a cost center. But it's really important for somebody who's trying it out for the first time that has a simple question like, oh, why do you do this? Or what do I need to buy at this store? It solves that friction point. And now you've offered something that for a long time, nobody else offered. So to do all that stuff, we had to build this core infrastructure. And I think as we get to having locations on every block, we can think about, okay, well, how can we add additional services to monetize and build off what we already have? I think to do that, historically, would have been a little too early. For a long time, the buy volume far outpaced the sell volume. It's much harder to buy Bitcoin than it is to sell it to somebody who wants it. So in terms of just supporting both flows, buy made a lot more sense. I think we're getting to the point now where it definitely is interesting to add, and I think we will add it at some point.
So you said then about other services. What other kind of services can you offer?
Sure. So part of the beauty of building an on-ramp that interfaces the legacy payment system is really any transaction you can power and enable, whether it's a bill payment, topping up minutes, adding other tokens, really any way to turn physical fiat into digital value, we can theoretically support with our platform because that's really what it's built for.
Oh, right. So a bit similar to Bit refill services.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Have you looked at offering support for Lightning yet?
We have, and it's something that also is on our list. I think it's extremely exciting. It's once again this balance of building something that is really interesting versus what our customers are asking for, and just making sure that we have everything, all our ducks in a row before we support something like that.
That's fair enough. Do you support any other coins, or are you Bitcoin only at the moment?
Bitcoin only at the moment. That's probably in addition to people wanting us to have a wallet, having a way to sell back the Bitcoin to us. That's probably up there in the top three. Why don't you add Ethereum or Litecoin or insert whatever coin? And once again, it comes down to making sure that we can offer that same great experience in really instant settlement as soon as you make the purchase of whatever cryptocurrency. I think it's increasingly easier to go back and forth between different digital tokens. So part of our thinking is, well, once you buy Bitcoin, you've already done the hardest part. it's pretty easy to go do from one token to another now. We are always thinking about, are we the best position to do something like that? And if so, how can we roll it out and scale? And I think that that's something that, depending on how, the rollout, depending on how we get to 100,000 locations around the country, will heavily influence how we prioritize that.
I have a feeling, and you might not admit it, but I have a feeling you are either a maximalist or very close to a maximalist anyway.
I have been told that.
Yeah, I have that feeling because I don't think it would have been that challenging for you to add, say, Litecoin. But the other thing is, I guess when the machines are there, if somebody has the Bitcoin facility switched on, it will advertise on the machine Bitcoin, I guess. Bitcoin's so dominant within the industry, I think you potentially risk diluting the proposition by the machine saying you could buy anything.
Yeah. So one thing that's great is there's a lot of customization available. So at the operator level, they can choose whether or not they want to show certain screens. Some operators, they want to focus on their cash cow, which is, making it really easy for people to withdraw their cash to pay for their bar tab or, whatever they're selling. So I think it is dilutive. I think that anyone that's interested in buying one of these altcoins probably knows about Bitcoin. So you could always slap another logo on the sand screen. One token becomes two, becomes three. And at the end of the day, we come from traditional finance. We understand that the more locations out there, the better for everyone, and likely the lower the fees and the onboarding friction. So I think today, Bitcoin is that one that has a lot of the value propositions that everyone was excited about when we're talking about digital currencies and the promise that it brings. So from that sense, I think maybe more of the Bitcoin maximalist attitude, but we try not to be very political when it comes to offering this and that, and it really comes down to what we can be confident that we can support in a trusted manner.
Okay, what are the risks that you carry in the business? Like, what are the most risky parts for you?
I would say, these days it doesn't really feel too risky, especially in the early days when we were moving, pushing machines around into storage and security that had tens of thousands of dollars in it. I think the risk is that we can't continue to scale and execute. I think the game plan has been laid out for us. We need to get to 100,000 machines, and then after we do that in the U.S., continue expanding. We've gotten a lot of interest from overseas partners, but we are pretty conservative in making sure that we want to finish what we started here before even entertaining anything like that.
Well, it's quite different as well. So I notice it because I go to the US a lot, as you know. So in the UK, we don't have as big a culture for these machines that are in gas stations and stores. You tend to find a lot, say in gas stations, you still tend to have what we call the hole in the wall, which is an ATM built into the wall, and it's usually provided by the banks, and you get free withdrawals. Whereas when I'm out in the US, it tends to be a lot more. You can go down a street, and almost every single store has an ATM, and you pay, anything from like $2 to $5 to make that withdrawal. So culturally, I know it's very different, say in the UK to the US, but there must be a variety of challenges when going into different markets.
Sure, absolutely, and part of that is a lot of the we think a lot of the market will come to us. There's a lot of partners or potential partners out there that are knowledgeable about the current country jurisdiction regulations and the payments systems. To your point, a lot of Europe and a lot of the world actually does offer same day or next day bank transfers. So the US is a little unique in that the ACH transfer can take 3, 7, 10 days, especially for your first transaction at Coinbase, for example. And that is unique just the way the legacy banking is built here. So you're right in that the value proposition as it stands today might be a little bit different for the UK or Europe or somewhere else. And we'd have to adapt or figure out, what the angle to enter the market is. What is universal though is kiosks, ATMs that, at the end of the day, take in cash or take a debit card and dispense cash or deliver some service. That at the end of the day is our core specialty. It's building software. It's working with legacy companies to really added additional capabilities and functionalities for them to interact and set payments, collect commissions, become part of this new digital economy.
Right. Okay. Down to my last couple of questions then. Firstly, across the business, can you give me any kind of interesting stats on volumes, average purchase price, or like are there specific locations that work much better than others? Any kind of interesting stats you've got from doing this business?
Yeah, I think probably the one we're most proud of is every single location that we've added, even if it's a town of 10,000 people, has done transactions and typically has done a lot more than a few transactions. And I think this is something that gets lost very often, is that America is extremely spread out, and that the people in the rural markets are very disadvantaged when it comes to core financial services, especially ones where they have to go in person. There's probably not very many bank branches, if any, in certain towns, and I think that that's an area where today we can provide a way for them to buy Bitcoin. It's not everything, certainly, but it's a stepping stone to providing some of the additionally core services in the future. In terms of average transaction volumes, things like that, $300 keeps on popping up as the blended average, which is pretty interesting. I don't think there's any real science behind that, but I think it's a nice stick in the ground in terms of, okay, it's a core amount of exposure. If it goes 10x, it becomes a pretty significant amount of money. If not, it's maybe a part of a paycheck. So it's interesting to track. Even over the bull and bear markets, that number has stayed the same.
Right. Okay. Okay. So listen, you've obviously been in the industry for a while. I consider you a phase two. I think of the industry as there's kind of like three phases that people have come in. There's like the early adopters who discovered Bitcoin very early on. I always consider like 2013, 14 kind of phase two. And then for me, like 2017 was phase three. Most people seem to have been one of those blocks. So you've been in the industry for a while. Kind of what's your view on it all now? How do you kind of take it all in? Because you will have seen significant changes between, say, 2013 and now. We've gone from it just being a nerdy toy to the president tweeting about it to having David Marcus talking about Libra in front of both the House and the Senate, and therefore Bitcoin being talked about. Like, how do you process it all? What do you make of it all?
I would say at the same time, a lot of the stuff has been unsurprising as much as it has been surprising in terms of Bitcoin becoming more and more part of the mainstream narrative. I think we all expected it back in 2013. I think in some ways it happened a lot sooner than we did. I would have imagined it to be a little more positive than Donald Trump's tweets, a lot of the focus historically. But I think what you're seeing is at the government levels, very, very, very strong education knowledge of what crypto is, and they're trying to figure out how they should play in space. In terms of as a business, I'm a little surprised that a lot of the on-ramp frictions still exist. I think a lot of companies, a lot of startups, they're going straight to Bitcoin 2.0. They're going straight to the world where everyone already has digital assets, and we just see this increasing friction that exists out there, which is why we're so passionate about building that bridge. Because Bitcoin 2.0 stuff, all this digital token marketplaces, lending, things like that, that's great, but you need a way for people to turn their fiat into crypto first, and only then, and with the positive experience, will they really be serious about, I think, the next leg.
Okay, brilliant. And then looking forward to the future, what do you think needs to happen in the industry? What do you think are the most important things that can happen, like internally in the industry to move everything forward, but also in terms of regulators, because they're obviously a big part of this right now?
Yeah, I think you're going to see an increasing number of partnerships with large legacy companies, partially because those are the ones that have navigated the regulatory waters historically. And also, we're entering a phase where you can't just raise a bunch of money and pray that your business is going to succeed off of spokes and mirrors. You actually have to deliver a product. And I think that companies that have core competencies, specifically in software and unique user bases and business models, will be able to bring that to the legacy partners out there scale in a very, very efficient way, and hopefully provide a continued and trusted way for people to interact with digital currencies.
Great. Okay. Well, listen, this has been great, fascinating. Thank you for coming on, Chris. This is your opportunity to tell people how to find out more about LibertyX and also how to follow you. And if anyone wants to get in touch, who do you want to hear from?
Sure. We're really big believers in Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ecosystem. If you have anything that you want to talk about, please reach out to me. Our company Twitter is LibertyX. We actually have an Instagram, which is very exciting. We post photos of our storefronts, of our ATMs. It's very sexy in a different way. So it's LibertyX on Instagram, and my email is chris@libertyx.com. Happy to talk to everyone in the space, and very excited to hopefully meet a lot of you.
All right. Well, next time I'm your way up in Boston, I'll make sure we go and grab a beer, maybe go and go out to Fenway and go and watch the Sox.
Would love that.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for coming on, Chris. As always, thanks for listening. And how was that? Did you enjoy that? How are you finding ATM week? Are you learning about new things that you didn't know about before? For me, it's been pretty fascinating to learn about this side of the industry, as I didn't know too much about it before. I've learned a lot more. I can see how these ATMs are useful for people. I thought Chris was really great to have on as well. Me and Chris had spoken to each other in the past. We'd connected and talked, and as ATM week came in, I knew he had to come on the podcast. So I love the story of his and Carl in starting LibertyX, having to run security on their first machine and relying on their own Bitcoin stash to provide liquidity. It's pretty crazy to think how far the market has moved on in just 5 years or so. And it's a pretty big call to try and put a Bitcoin ATM or teller on every block in America. But this is the sort of thing that's going to really help drive adoption. So I think it's great because these Bitcoin ATMs, they do also operate as advertising for Bitcoin. So that's pretty cool. I also love how they support only Bitcoin. I know Chris said they might look at supporting other coins, but I think secretly he's a Bitcoin maximalist. So let's see how that plays out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Do check back tomorrow. I've got another episode coming out. Yes, a show every day this week for ATM week. But if you do have any feedback, you can get me on hello@whatbitcoindid.com. Also, huge thanks to everyone who supports the show, whatever you do. If you leave me a review, whether you're a sponsor, whatever you do, it all helps. If you do want to support the show, you can find out more at my website. It's whatbitcoindid.com. Just click on the support section. That'll explain everything to you. I've got about a week left of my holiday now, and then I'm going to be heading back to the UK, getting back to my normal swing of things, and I've got so many more great interviews planned. Anyway, if you've got any questions, reach out to me. It's hello@whatbitcoindid.com.